The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, translated into modern English by Neville Cogan. Group A, the prologue. When in April the sweet shower falls, and pierced the drought of March to the root of all, the veins are bathed in liquor of such power as brings unto about the endearing of the flower, when also Zephyrus with his sweet breath exhales an air in every grove and heath. Upon the tender roots the young sun, his half course in the sign of the ram has run, and the small fowl are making melody that sleep away the night with open eye. So nature pricks them with the heart, and the heart engages. Then people long to go on pilgrimages, and palmers long to seek the stranger strands of far off saints hallowed in sundry lands, and specially from every shire's end of England down to Canterbury they wend to seek the holy blissful martyr quick, to give his help to them when they are sick. It happened in the season that one day in Southwark at the Tabard as I lay, ready to go on the pilgrimage and start for Canterbury, the most devout at heart. At night they came into the hostelry, some 29 in a company of sundry folk, happening then to fall in fellowship, and they were pilgrims all, that towards Canterbury meant to ride. The rooms and stables of the inn were wide. They made us easy, all was of the best, and briefly, when the sun had gone to rest, I'd spoken to them all upon the trip, and soon was one of them in fellowship, pledged to rise early and to take the way to Canterbury, as you heard me say. But none the less, while I have time and space, before my story takes a further pace, it seems a reasonable thing to say what their condition was, the full array of each of them as it appeared to me, according to profession and degree, and what apparel they were riding in, and at a night I therefore will begin. There was a knight, a most distinguished man, who from the day on which he first began to ride abroad had followed chivalry, truth, honour, generous and courtesy. He had done nobly in his sovereign's war, and ridden into Banto, no man more, as well in Christian as in heathen places, and were honoured for his noble graces. When we took Alexandria, he was there. He often sat at table in the chair. In honour above all nations when in Prussia. In Lithuania he had ridden, and Russia. No Christian man so often of his rank, when in Granada Alges- Algeciras sank. Under assault he had been there, and in North Africa, raiding Ben Marin. In Anatolia he had been as well, and fought when Aias and Atalia fell. For all along the Mediterranean coast he had embarked with many a noble host. In 15 mortal battles he had been, and jousted for our faith at Tramesine. Thrice in the list, and always killed his man. This same distinguished knight had led the van. Once with the Bay of Balat doing work for him against another heathen Turk. He was of sovereign value in all eyes, and though it was distinguished, he was wise, and in his bearing modest as a maid. He never let yet a boorish thing had said in all his life to any, come what might. He was a perfect gentle knight. Speaking of his equipment, he possessed fine horses, but he was not gaily dressed. He wore a Faustin tunic stained and dark, with smudges where his armour had left marks. Just home from service, he had joined our ranks to do his pilgrimage and render thanks. He had a son with him, a fine young squire, a lover, a cadet, a lad of fire, with locks as curly as if they had been pressed. He was some 20 years of age, I guessed. In stature he was a moderate length, with wonder, agility and strength. He'd seen some service with the cavalry in Flanders and Artois and Picardy, and had done valiantly in little space of time in hope to win his lady's grace. He was embroidered like a meadow bright, and full of freshest flowers, red and white. Singing he was, or fluting all the day. He was as fresh as is the month of May. Short was his gown, the sleeves were long and wide. He knew the way to sit a horse and ride. He could make songs and poems and recite, knew how to joust, dance, to draw and write. He loved so hotly that till dawn grew pale, he slept as little as the nightingale. Courteous he was, lowly and serviceable, and carved to service his father at the table. There was a yeoman with him at his side, no other servant, so he chose to ride. This yeoman wore a coat and hood of green, and peacock feathered arrows bright and keen, and neatly sheathed hung at his belt the while, for he could dress his gear in yeoman style. His arrows never drooped their feathers low, and in his hand he bore a mighty bow. His head was like a nut, his face was brown. He knew the whole woodcraft, up and down. A saucy brace was on his arm to ward. It formed the bowstring, and a shield and sword. Hung at one side, at the other side slipped a jaunty dirk, a spear sharp and well equipped. A medal of St. Christopher he wore, of shining silver at breast and bore. A hunting horn well slung and burnished clean, the handle from a baldric bright and green. He was a proper forester, I guess. There also was a nun, a prioress. Her way of smiling very simple and coy. Her greatest oath was only by St. Loy, and she was known as Madame Eglantine, and well she sang a service with a fine, intoning through her nose. It was most seemly, and she spoke daintily in French extremely. After the school of Stratford at Bow, French in Paris style, she did not know. At meat her manners were well taught, and withal no morsel from her lips did she let fall, nor dipped her fingers in the sauce too deep, but she carried the morsel up and keep the smallest drop from falling on her breast. For the courtliness she had special zest, and she would wipe her upper lip so clean that not a trace of grease was to be seen upon the cup when she had drunk to eat. She reached a hand sedately for the meat. She certainly was very entertaining, pleasant and friendly in her ways, and straining to counterfeit a courtly kind of grace, a stately bearing fitting to her place, and to seem dignified in all her dealings. As for her sympathies and tender feelings, she was charitably solicitous. She had weep if she had saw a mouse caught and entrapped, if it were dead or bleeding, and she had little dogs she would be feeding with roasted flesh or milk or fine white bread, and bitterly she wept if one were dead, or someone took a stick and made it smart. She was all sentient and tender heart. Her veil was gathered in a seemly way. Her nose was elegant, her eyes glass grey, Her mouth was small, but soft and red. Her forehead certainly was fair of spread, almost span across the brow I own. She was indeed by no means undergrown. Her cloak, I noticed, had a graceful charm. She wore a coral trinket on her arm, a set of beads and goldies tricked in green. On the whence hung a golden brooch of brightest sheen, on which there were graven, crowned, and lower, amore vincit omnia. Amor vincit omnia. Another nun, the secretary at her cell, was riding with her, and 3 priests as well. A monk there was, one of finest sort, who rode the country hunting with his sport. A manly man, to be an abbot able. Many a dainty horse he had in stable. His bridle, when he rode, a man might hear, jingling and whistling, wind as clear. Aye, and as loud as does the chapel bell, when my lord monk was prior of the cell. The rule of good St. Bennet or St. Maur, as old and strict, he tended to ignore. He let go by the things of yesterday, and which modern world more spacious way. He did not rate the text on plucked hen, which says that hunters are not holy men. And that a monk uncloistered as a mare, fish out of water flapping on the pier. That is to say, a monk out of his cloister was a text he held not worth an oyster. I agreed